now we are on to our top 5 segment, man. And you guys know we are Disney adults. We are Disney men, that is for sure.
Yes.
And of course, Dustin loves celebrating the success of Michael Eisner that he had way back in the day. And that is what we're talking about this week, the Renaissance era of Disney films. Man, oh man. Top 5 Disney Renaissance age films for Disney. And it's honestly bonkers the amount of beautiful music that comes out of these films, the freaking slate that they had in this time span. It's really amazing, and I really wish we could get back to what they had in the Renaissance era.
Um. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah,
This era was critical, though. This was the resurgence of Disney's animation, which
yeah.
was failing at this point.
Hmm.
But there was some contention there. Eisner is responsible for putting people into place to do this, but said person that he put in place wanted all the credit and it did not go well. We'll talk about it after we do our top 5, because there are 2 animated feature films nominated for Oscars this year, the Wallace and Gromit one and the Wild Robot, that would not exist if not for the Renaissance era of Disney. And I'll explain that after we do these. But it's interesting.
That's for sure. Let's dive into the top 5 then, and then my number 5 goes to Hercules. This
Ooh.
one is kind of very wishy-washy with a lot of people. You either like it or you don't. But I love it. I love the story of Hercules. I love Greek gods, and so that was always very freaking fun to watch. And it has an awesome, badass soundtrack, so that always gets you going. But yeah, I think the animation was honestly phenomenal, and Hercules is supposed to be like this bigger than life Greek god, like I said. So it was also very inspiring to see as a young lad coming up and watching this film. So yeah, number 5 for me, Hercules.
There you go. My number 5, same thing. You either really loved it or you just weren't a fan of it. Thankfully, the majority of the people really loved it. The Hunchback of Notre Dame. I think when this was first announced, they're like, how the hell are you going to do The Hunchback of Notre Dame as an animated kids film? Like, what?
It's dark as shit.
It's dark as shit, and Quasimodo is terrifying, and it's like, it's not a really family-friendly story, and yet they did it. And people loved Quasimodo. People were carrying around toy Quasimodos. Like, he was like the coolest thing, you know? Which was mind-boggling to me. But again, they turned it into a really solid love story, and really gave it some heart. Phenomenal soundtrack, which all of these Renaissance films, that it was mandatory. It was like part of the success of these films was the soundtracks and what they were able to do with them, and bringing in legends like Elton John and Phil Collins and like all these people that were doing these soundtracks. But yeah, my number 5, The Hunchback of Notre Dame. I loved it. I couldn't get enough of it when I was young. Like, I loved it.
Yeah, borderline not a kid's movie, but yes, a very
yeah.
good movie. Yeah.
It definitely one of those that's a kid's movie that had a lot of adult things in it if you were an adult watching it. Went over the kids' heads, but the adults got it all. Like, they knew what was going on.
And that's the thing too. You can't really watch it as a kid and understand everything that's going on. You have to go back and watch it as an adult to really get a grasp on what it is. Number 4 for me goes to Aladdin. I mean, come on. Robin Williams as the genie. I think one of his most iconic roles, obviously. I mean, remember when they redid Aladdin for the live action version and Will Smith got cast? There was a little pushback on that.
There was.
There was a little pushback because Robin Williams is such an iconic individual in the entertainment industry and in life. But this original film, honestly, it has a special place in my heart. I remember watching it as a kid and just enjoying every second of it, and then hitting rewind on the VCR to make sure I could watch it again, because you got to be kind and rewind, that's for sure. But yeah, I think this one has some of the best music like we've been talking about, and this one I think will definitely be a staple in my future child's life. That
Oh,
is without a doubt, without a doubt. So yeah, number 4 for me, Aladdin.
yeah, they all have to be. They
Yeah, they
all
really
have to
do.
be. Yeah, there's no doubt about it. My number four, and I know is on your list too. The majority of these films now, as we move up, they're all going
It's
to be
hard,
basically
yeah.
the same films because they're all that good. My number four is Mulan. You guys
Mm.
know anything about me? You've been a fan of the show for a long time. You know I'm huge into the Asian culture and Japan and ancient Japan and all of what it stands for and what it represented. And so obviously Mulan, I was all in. I'm like, hell yes. It was beautiful. The animation, the artwork, the production design to pull off old Japan, ancient Japan, and the palaces and the feudal war that was going on in that era and that time to just pull it off the way that they pulled it off was just stunning to me. Every time I watch that movie, I'm just in awe of the way it looks. And then, of course, the story is obviously outstanding. The acting is phenomenal. Everything about it worked. The soundtrack is fantastic. But for me, it was one of those visually appealing films that really just captured the essence of what that era and that part of the world stood for back then. And I loved it. I couldn't get enough of it. So my number four, Mulan.
Ah, such a good pick, which leads me into my number 3, Mulan. Definitely, I also love the gender kind of swapping roles to where, even though I'm a woman, I can still do the same things as men do. I love that. And to, still fight for your family's honor because the last surviving man or the man of the house, I guess they were saying, I mean, it was her dad and he was old. And so,
Yeah.
she stood up for her family and stood up for what she believed in and went to serve her country in this crazy war, which I mean was that the character was kind of based on Attila the Hun, which
Yes.
is always a very interesting character as well, and always a very interesting historical figure to go back and do research on. But yeah, Mulan, the dragon. I mean, how can you not have Eddie Murphy as the
Yeah.
dragon in the
Yeah.
live action film? That was my biggest gripe with the live action Mulan, and not having any music in the live action
Yeah.
Mulan.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like that's what made this film so freaking great. But yeah, anyway, number 3 for me, Mulan as well.
There you go. And my number three, this is a no-brainer too. Brilliant freaking soundtrack, unbelievable. This is a story that has been told over and over and over and over in old black and white films, television shows, comic books, the original novels that it's all based on. Like it's been, and then feature films. It's been so told so many times. You're like, do we touch this? Do we even want to try? The answer was yes. We're gonna give it a whirl, and I'm talking about Tarzan.
Mm.
And wow, just wow, how they pulled Tarzan off. Like some of the most incredible things when he's like sliding on the vines and and just the whole relationship between him and the apes. Rosie O'Donnell, I was like, Rosie O'Donnell, but then it worked, and I'm just like, the whole thing worked for me. I was a huge fan of Tarzan to begin with. I've always been a fan of Tarzan. I'm not old enough to have been around for these, but I caught the reruns of them, the Johnny Weissmuller films. He for me was the definitive Tarzan. So I was like, how are they going to come at this? And then, of course, during my little time in the 70s, they had the animated cartoon with Tarzan. So I was going in with high expectations. Like, they got to hit. And then they did. They just killed it. And yet with its own very unique twist. Right?
Hmm.
It was very much its own, even though it played on a story that we've seen over and over and over and over again. I just thought it was beautiful. I liked the relationship and how they built the back and forth between him and Jane and just everything about it. And I think the thing that makes it, though, and this is just my opinion, but the thing that really made it for me was Phil Collins. This is one of the exemplary soundtracks out of the Renaissance era that just really brought it home. Like, and there were some good soundtracks in these films. But for me, this is one of, I still, every time I hear any of these songs, I'm belting them out every time I hear them. It's like, it's that good. So, yeah, number 3 for me, Tarzan.
Leading into my number two, which is also Tarzan. I think it's honestly, it's my favorite soundtrack of the entire Renaissance era. Maybe the best soundtrack of Disney films, animated films, in my opinion. Because Phil Collins just went hard,
Oh, it
bro. He
just
didn't
did.
have to go that hard, but
Mm-hmm.
it's, oh man. I also love how Disney does the thing where they loosely plant seeds to where like other stories might be tied into other stories, and maybe some people didn't know, and I hope I'm not getting this wrong, but I believe Tarzan was one of the first movies that they tried working out some CGI with the parents getting lost in the ocean. That whole ocean shit,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
believe in the storm is there's a little CGI and stuff, so you can tell the different animations. But yeah, Tarzan definitely, it was actually the first movie I ever saw in the movie theaters. So
Really?
of course, it holds a special place in my heart. So yeah, number two for me as well, Tarzan.
There you go. Wow. And yeah, and you were hinting at, but for anybody who's not, that shipwrecked parents and laid the seed work, and there's a lot of people that still think this is true and want to see this happen. Tarzan and the girls from Frozen are related.
Yep,
That's where they're trying to lay that stuff out. Maybe I've seen a lot
maybe
of theories that it makes total sense. So
it does.
it really, I don't know. Oddly, oddly, it's weird that one of is not on either one of our lists, and I want to give it an honorable mention because it's the first animated film, and it's from the Renaissance era that was ever nominated for Best Picture. Okay, it's Beauty and the Beast. But
Mm,
that wouldn't have happened if not for my number two, which was the one out of the Renaissance film, the first one out of the Renaissance era that took it over to the top to the smash success that the Renaissance era was. And everything beyond this just became blockbuster banana, but just huge. And I'm talking about The Little Mermaid.
mm.
That was the one that sent it over the top. Once The Little Mermaid hit, everybody was like, holy shit, this is the best ever. Disney is king again. Boom, everything. And obviously, because The Little Mermaid at that time, I mean, it was the biggest film that everybody was talking about it. Everybody was singing the songs. Everybody knew all the characters. Everybody, it was literally everywhere. And I think legitimately Disney was like, shit, how are we going to follow this up? Like, because this thing is so huge and so beloved. If we don't fire right out of the gate after this one with another one, we're in big trouble. Like, so, a lot of pressure was on it. But, and little known fact, if for anybody out there who's unaware of this, but I want everybody to be aware of this, The Little Mermaid, the real life visual model for Ariel, Alyssa Milano, during
Mm.
her time on Who's the Boss. That was the visual inspiration that the artists used to create Ariel. So who knew? But if you're my age, you knew Alyssa Milano was a massively huge person back then and influence, and I mean she was the it girl, and so it only makes sense that they would kind of fashion Ariel after her. Kind of like they did way back in the day with Tinkerbell with Marilyn Monroe. For anybody who doesn't know that, that's Tinkerbell's look in Disney with Marilyn Monroe. But it makes sense. And this was the first one that really kind of came out gangbusters with the soundtrack, right? Like fuck, Little Mermaid, like every fucking song, man. It was just like slaying. People to this day still sing that shit. Like, I mean, it's just everywhere. So, yeah, my number two, The Little Mermaid. It's
Mm.
under the sea. Come on. Oh, come on. Under the. So good. So good.
Great pick, man. Great freaking pick. Well, number one for both of us, I think, in my opinion, is still holds the crown and is still the king of the best animated film that has come out of Disney of all time.
Oh, without doubt.
Lion King. The Lion King. Oh my goodness. Not only is the soundtrack great, Elton John, Can You Feel the Love Tonight? Like
Yes.
Hakuna Matata, like a great friends buddy comedy, redemption story, like, but of course it's Disney, so a parent has to die somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
But like it's one of the best films honestly of all time, in my opinion. It's such a great. I believe it. They emulated or took a lot of inspiration from Hamlet. I think it
Yes.
was Hamlet.
Yep.
So yeah, of course it was gonna be freaking good. But I think Lion King is definitely the film that all of these. It's like Superman. The Lion King that came out, the animated one, is the animated film that they're continuing to chase that success. They want it to be that level of purity and that level of success at the same time. But yeah, I love this film so freaking much, man. And this is a huge historic established IP that I think we still have more films to come in the near future.
It's, this IP is the number one movie now, 2025, this past weekend. That shows
Yeah.
you the longevity and staying power of what this film did for Disney. Now, there was a couple in between The Little Mermaid and The Lion King, but The Lion King was the massive success after Little that they were banking on. Like, how do
Yeah.
we follow up? Lion King did it. Lion King was like, this is it. Now we're here. So, kind of what I was talking about, teasing into this. Jeffrey Katzenberg worked at Paramount with Eisner, and Eisner brought him over when he became the CEO of Disney. And he made him chairman of Walt Disney Studios. And at this time, you guys, Walt Disney Studios was at the bottom of the barrel. They hadn't had a box office hit in forever, okay? And he was tasked with turning around the studio. He helped with Michael Eisner and Frank Wells create Touchstone Pictures so that Disney could start putting out R-rated films, not underneath the mouse banner. That started turning around Walt Disney Pictures. But then Eisner said, okay, we're doing great there, but animation is what built this house, and we need to fix that. So that became Katzenberg's driving force, was to fix the animation. When he started seeing success there with the Renaissance films, he basically told Eisner, hey, I want to be made president of the company. You're number two. Push Frank Wells out, make him some sort of chairman emeritus, give him a BS title. And Eisner was no way. Eisner and Wells' relationship was like this. And he's like, not going to happen. I'm not going to hurt him like that. I'm not going to do that to him. And then Frank died in a crash. And Katzenberg just assumed that was a given. He was going to be named president and COO. Eisner took on the responsibility himself, made himself chairman and president. Well, Katzenberg was not fucking happy about that. And the reason that happened, y'all, is because Roy E. Disney at that time and Eisner felt like Katzenberg was trying to take too much credit for the turnaround of Disney. And they did not like that. And so basically when Katzenberg was told, you're not going to be president, he left. And you know what he did? He approached David Geffen and Steven Spielberg, and the birth of DreamWorks happened. DreamWorks SKG, as it was known back then, Spielberg, Katzenberg, Geffen. So my point is with this is if the Renaissance era of Disney never happens and the massive success of those animated movies never happen, Katzenberg never leaves to form DreamWorks with the other two. You don't have Shrek. You don't have, think about the Wild Robot and Wallace and Gromit, like I said, but think about all the other movies that have success. How to Train Your Dragon. Think about all of the massive Puss in Boots, everything that has come out of DreamWorks. None of that exists without the Renaissance era of Disney films and animation. So there you go, how critically important it is. And then, of course, it's shifted so many times now. DreamWorks broke up. DreamWorks Pictures is now a subsidiary of its own thing, but distributes through Universal. And Universal owns DreamWorks Animation now. And, of course, we know that Katzenberg went on to try to do, what was that little thing that he tried to launch? Quibi. Yeah. That didn't go so well or whatever. But anyway, my point being is that this era of Disney and this man, Jeffrey Katzenberg, critically vital to what we see animation as now. And there you go. So if you don't think what you do matters and how it can play well into the future 35, 40 years later, that story should tell you everything. Like,
Yeah, completely agree, man. There's your history lesson for the week right there from the mouth himself. Oh my goodness, that's freaking awesome. But yeah, that is our top five Disney Renaissance age films. Please be sure to comment below. Let us know what your favorites are because there's so many out
oh,
there. So
dude.
there's some other ones that we did not put on the list, and it was hard not to. I will say that. It was definitely hard not to.